Hi there, thanks for checking this video out. It's a bright sunny day here in Winona, Minnesota, and I'm checking out some of the improvements that are necessary to make the TCMC train come to life. We're roughly 2 weeks away from Amtrak's decision to make the Empire Builder a 3-time per week train. And you're going to see the Empire Builder as I saw it, and it was a busy stop for Amtrak today. Some of the locals have educated me on what makes Amtrak click in Winona. Some of the issues that I saw today that are surrounding the improvements are also going to help CP in their freight business. So let's take a look at some of the video and some of the pictures that I gathered. On the audio on this, I got Brian Nelson with me, president of All Aboard Minnesota. Brian is actually in the video, but I'm not going to point him out to you. Both of us were at the Winona station on Friday, October 2nd, when the Empire Builder arrived on time, no less. So Brian, any comments, any observations, recollections you have?
Well, Terry, first off, thank you for shooting this video. I think it's important to see that, in this pandemic era, the long-distance trains are still being used, and at a critical stop like Winona, where, college students still continue to be a major and heavy user of the long-distance service in the Empire Builder. It was interesting for me to observe all of the station activity that happened that particular Friday. 20 plus people getting off, 9 people, as you see queued up here, boarding one coach. There were others that were boarding other cars in the train down the track. But, people still need to use these trains, and it's good that they are still being used. The long-distance trains are providing now almost half of Amtrak's revenue in this pandemic period. So it was just very good to see all the station activity that was happening. People are still using the train. It's still a vital part of people's transportation needs. It was just good to observe this.
Okay, so the gent that just walked in front of me, walking away, so that was one of the crew members. I didn't realize that this was a crew change point for the Empire Builder, and one of the other crew that was waiting to go on, and you also reiterated that their crew change points are Winona to St. Cloud. So that's not exactly a long day, is it?
Yeah, this has been a long-standing district. So this next crew will then take the Empire Builder into Chicago. Yes, it is not a long crew district, that is quite true.
You mentioned that there's a caretaker at this station. Did the caretaker stage the passengers so that they were spread out between the coach car and the Portland section and that, or did people just instinctively go to these spots?
I don't know, Terry. I don't know who the caretaker is, but I don't believe the caretaker was there that particular morning. I didn't see anybody necessarily directing people out there, so I don't know. That's a good question.
And you saw there when I pivoted towards the head of the train, you saw some smokers there that had got out, because not all of these people that you're seeing on the platform are getting off or getting on. These are people that just getting off the train, and they're just mulling around, which added to the amount of people that were on the platform.
I think one of the important things to note for the second train frequency between the Twin Cities and Chicago is that the dwell time at stations such as Winona would be maybe even less than half that of the Empire Builder. So one, it might not be a crew change point for the second train. And so normal dwell time for the Empire Builder in Winona is 4 to 5 minutes. This is obviously longer than that. The dwell time for the second train would probably be in a range of 2 to 2.5 minutes. So when you think about all of the station stops between St. Paul Union Depot and Chicago, when you're cutting, the 13 stops in half, you're saving almost a half an hour off the schedule. The second train would be in a range of more like 7.5 hours, which makes it far more competitive with driving. Now, obviously, there are people that would take the train anyway. Obviously, people do because they're boarding the Empire Builder here. But I think that's important to note that the second train dwell times would be less, and it would cut half an hour off of the schedule.
Our next stop on this video is reviewing the track next to the station. When you look at the satellite image on Google Maps of Winona Station and the surrounding railroad tracks, you will see the siding track stops at Main Street. You'll also see the old boarding track that used to carry passenger trains directly in front of Winona Station. This satellite image was used to report information in the March 2020 TCMC newsletter. The boarding track has since been removed. You can see on the left the siding track has been restored beyond the Main Street crossing and connects to the main. When you look beyond the hoppers, you can see the concrete dividers on the station platform. The siding track was restored after the completion of a pedestrian underpass tunnel for Winona State University. You can see in the picture the siding has a hand throw switch. This alone would scare any Amtrak employee in the wintertime. Not only would it take time for a conductor to throw the switch, but after the train passes, the switch would have to be thrown back for the main. This process would need to be repeated at the east end of the siding. This siding track is restricted to 10 miles per hour. Final construction for the TCMC would install new remote-controlled switches at both ends of this siding, and it would increase the speed. When you look east of Winona Station towards La Crosse, there are still siding tracks in use by the Canadian Pacific Railroad. These tracks are used by trucks doing manual loading and offloading of goods. The siding track, which would be used for passenger train stops, is currently used by the Canadian Pacific for staging cars that are coming out of the siding tracks. The city of Winona hopes any improvement in the tracks around the station will decrease the amount of time trains block street crossings while creating their trains. The other significant construction project around Winona for the implementation of the TCMC train is loosely centered around Tower CK. The actual switching tower does not exist anymore. This was a busy crossing over 100 years ago. Today, the Union Pacific still uses this track to service a few large customers in Winona. But the track is now a dead-end branch line, requiring the UP to access the branch via trackage rights through La Crosse and Winona up to several times per week. This usage is not the major bottleneck on the Canadian Pacific Main Line west of Winona. The CP does have a siding west of Tower CK that's prime mission is managing interchange traffic from the Dakota, Minnesota, and Eastern Railroad, the Waseca sub, going to Rochester. Often enough, this interchange work spills onto the main line and blocks any through traffic. TCMC construction will extend this siding beyond Tower CK according to this drawing from HNTB. This construction will surely help the TCMC and the Empire Builder overtake CP Freights, but it will also help CP Freight operations be more efficient. This eastbound Canadian Pacific freight train is exiting the current siding track west of Tower CK. You can easily imagine how this siding can create a bottleneck for freight trains, even if they simply just want to get out of the way.
So in addition to watching the passenger flow in Winona in these COVID times and observing what actually happens at a rural city like Winona, Terry and I did get a tour of some of the infrastructure projects in Winona for the second train, in which the bulk of the capital expenditures are. And so it was very good to see some of the infrastructure needs that the Canadian Pacific Railway has asked for if a second passenger train is to run. And so Terry and I spent some time at what's called CK Tower Junction, and that's where three railroads actually come together along the Canadian Pacific Main Line. And it is truly a bottleneck right now where the Union Pacific, the DMNE, and the Canadian Pacific all intersect. There's a short siding there now, which is a very slow siding. Trains can only go about 10 miles an hour through there. And the main line is used for switching, and it is quite a bottleneck. One of the main infrastructure projects is to run a siding that would be about 2 miles long, if not longer, through that junction area to increase the fluidity of freight traffic as well as to enable a second passenger